All right, well, let's begin. This lecture, we're going to be talking about using SQLite as our database. We'll be looking at how to get help within SQLite, how to create a database, run commands, view tables, how to actually exit SQLite, which is, if you don't know for the first few times, like, how do I get out of here? That'll be helpful. So in doing so, we're going to use SQLite to dig into some SQL concepts and get more familiar with, creating a table and interacting with that table in a CRUD fashion. So creating, reading, updating, deleting, getting a little bit more familiar with the SQL commands that allow you to control your data and understand your data better. So with that said, let's go ahead and start and create a SQLite database, and we'll take a little tour of what's going on there. So from your command prompt, your shell, your terminal, the assumption here is that you have SQLite installed. And so assuming you have SQLite installed, you can check the version of your SQLite by executing SQLite 3, if that's the latest version that you have, and executing the -- version. And you should get some sort of 3.28 or something probably above 3.0. So that lets you know that SQLite 3 is running on your machine. And SQLite 3 SQLite is pretty easy to manage because it's file-based. So it actually performs file operations and does updating that way versus having like a full-fledged database server running as a background job on your system. So it's different in that respect. So it's easier for learning how databases work and how SQL works, tables work. And so that's why we're using it in this learning environment. So the first thing we want to do is we want to create a database. And so to create a database is actually pretty straightforward. I'm going to create just use the executable SQLite 3 and then give it a name of a file. So I'm going to give this a name. So I'll just call it users. And then the extension for this file is SQLite, like that. And so what that will do is create that file, initialize it as a database, and then open up a console into that database. So I'm going to execute that. And notice it puts me, displays the version, gives me the command for help, and then puts me at a SQLite prompt. And from the SQLite prompt, I can look around. So for example, I can type in .help. And that'll get me through some of the commands that you can run in here. And we most likely won't be using most of these, but some of them will definitely come in handy. So like if I type in databases, let's just see what that does. So notice it points straight to the file that I created earlier. Anything else for now? No, we'll come back, I think, for now. And there'll be a couple others that we'll use. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a table. And a table, again, is a collection of records which have fields that identify each record. So in this particular example, we have users. So let me create this table. And so I'm going to use the create table syntax. So create table. Oops, let's see, create table users. And I'm going to have an ID, which is an integer. It's a primary key. And I'm going to have it auto increment. And this basically be our unique identifier for each record. And so it makes it really easy to to find that particular one if you know the ID. And so we'll do name, and that'll be a text, and then we'll also do, maybe we'll just do first and last name. First name, and last name. So I think that looks good. So if that works, I should be able to type in tables command, and it should show me there I have users. So it did successfully create. And so now we can walk through and actually interact with this. There's nothing in there. So the command to see what all the records are is select, and I can do first name. I can do ID, first name, last name from users like that, and there's nothing there. There is a shortcut if you want to select all the fields or columns anyway. You can do a select asterisk or a star from users, and that's basically a shorthand shortcut notation for the same thing. So let's get some data into this thing. Insert. We want to insert into users, and we want to insert a first name and a last name. Values, and I'll just put my name like that. So notice here we're going to insert this field has to match a field. Both of these have to match fields that exist in the database or in the table. If they don't, you'll get an error. And also this first value matches the first field that you reference from users, and the second value matches or references the second listed field of the table. So with that assumption, I can go ahead and execute this command, and there's a syntax error. So it should be values, not value. And then I should be able to run that successfully. Now, if I select all from users, notice we do have a record in there now. So let's do that a couple more times. Again, we'll verify. Yep, we're getting more records in there. Jane Doe. Cool. So notice we're building up the records in our table. So I guess we've done the create part, and we're doing some reading. So I can also get a little bit more specific on my select. So select all from users, so I just grabbed everything. I can get a little bit more specific here. I can put what's called a where clause and fine tune my condition, my filtering on what type of data I'm looking for. So I could do ID equals 1, ID equals 3. So I'm looking specifically, give me everything from users where ID equals 3. So I'm kind of fine tuning that. I can also check for first name equal to Carmen, and that gives me that result. I can say, give me all the records where last name equals Doe, and I get 2 records. So we can fine tune our queries to get a little bit more specific and detailed into what we want. And that'll become a very, very powerful tool for us. And we're also, so we've done create, read, we want to be able to do an update. So let's go ahead and update. We can update users and set we'll set first name equal to Jack, where ID equals 2. So we'll update John's name to Jack and see where that goes. So and let's do a select all from users, and notice it found the record with an ID of 2 and updated John to Jack. So, and you can update, more than one at a time if you wanted to, but for this case, I think you get the idea. We can just set, you know, the field name, the column name, and then the value that you wanted updated. So we got create, read, update, delete, and so we can do a delete now. So delete from users where ID equals 1. So I'll delete my record, do a select all from users. And one thing to note here, it deleted the whole first record with where my ID, everything, delete the whole thing. And when I do an insert, another insert into users, and I need someone else's name, Sue here. So if I insert a new record, notice we don't reuse one, we don't start over at one, it just auto, that's the part where we declare the table to have an auto incrementing field, and it has to be unique. So one is basically lost forever now, and we don't reuse that in this table ever again. So just something to keep in mind. That's why we have that that unique identifier set in the ID field. Cool. So we've gone through, just to kind of review here, we created a database by running the SQLite 3 file name. Once we're in, we can run commands, we can view tables, and then in SQL, just doing like an overview, we created a table, and then we walk through some basic CRUD commands. And this will serve as a foundation to understanding, if you do end up using an object relational mapper library, an active record library, whether you're in Laravel or Ruby on Rails or some other web framework, a lot of them have an ORM that executes SQL commands for you. But again, I think having some sort of reference or understanding of how SQL works is going to serve you really, really well if you end up using some of those tools. So lastly, we are going to quit out of here, and that's just using the quit command. And so notice my users.sqlite is a file, and that's everything saved and preserved inside of that, and we didn't lose it. All right. So if I wanted to go back and jump back in and select all from users, all my data is still there. So that's kind of a neat thing with SQLite. It's very, very manageable. You can take that file and actually email it, send it, copy it, and someone else can open that in their SQLite and interact with the database as well. So it's a really powerful tool that I don't think people use enough for like small projects. So, all right, well, this concludes this lecture on SQL and SQLite. And so enjoy, have a good day.